Now, we all called it last week. Damage limitation was always going to be the order of the day at the Etihad Stadium. 4-0 the final score. Steve, good to have you back this week. It was a tall order. It was always going to be. But how did they do for you?
I think it kind of went pretty much as we expected. I mean, if anything, we actually set up in a more kind of positive structure than I was expecting. I fully expected us to go back to a back three or back five or back 10 really. And yet, no, I mean, you look at so I saw a graphic at half time. I think it was Jacob that posted it, which had the sort of average positions of all our players plotted out, and the vast majority of our players were in the City half. So that was a surprise. But it's, I mean, I must admit, I didn't watch the game this week. It was just one that I thought, I really can't put myself through it. So I've kind of seen back highlights and stuff. But yeah, I mean, like first half, it just feels as if we were okay. I mean, clearly they're always going to have a lot of the ball. They're going to create chances no matter how well you defend them. Because let's be honest, we're not great defensively. But yeah, we like structure-wise, I thought we were well organised, and yeah, I mean, we kept them down to kind of what you would maybe say is a sort of bare minimum to the amount of chances that you would expect City to create against a side like us. Second half, we let it slide a little bit. I think certainly early in the second half, which, I mean, let's be honest, that's been a common problem of ours all season. Letting things slip early in the second half. So that's one thing that's been an issue. And I mean, halftime team talks are obviously not doing what they're designed to at the moment. So that's a problem. But at the end of the day, you're playing against a team that's financed by a nation state, and it's not something that you can compete against.
It's interesting you didn't watch the game. I was offered the chance to work on Saturday, and I grabbed it with both hands because I thought it's going to be better than watch. Did you see any of the game, Glenn? If you watched the goals, did you see it last night?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I saw a fair bit of it. It was. Yeah, it was interesting. City have got an aura about them now, more so than they had last year. It's the sort of aura that Liverpool had in the 80s and United had under Ferguson, in that teams are beaten before the game kicks off now. And Haaland's got that on an individual level. And not only does he create space by, playing right on the front line, which is City didn't have that last year, so he creates more space for the likes of Foden and De Bruyne anyway. But he attracts players all over the place. There were times when both our centre backs were marking him, and Perrault was coming in and marking him as well. So, they've got the golden ticket with that guy. He's the final piece of the jigsaw, probably like Van Dijk was at Liverpool, or the goalkeeper was when they signed him. So it's no disgrace to get beaten by them at all. And as Steve said, 4-0 is kind of that. There'll be a lot of teams that do worse than that. I mean, United let in 6, Forest let in 6. I don't know what other results they've had, but it's been ridiculous, and it will carry on that way. But I have a bit of an issue with the way we played the second half, because Pep knew what we were going to do. He kind of knew we were going to go 4-2-2-2 because it gave him problems last year. And he came up with this plan of basically playing 3 at the back and playing Cancelo as an extra winger. And I felt sorry. If I was Kyle Walker-Peters, I would have been absolutely furious in the second half that carried on. I mean, he reminded me of someone playing whack-a-mole. He had Cancelo, he had De Bruyne, he had Foden, all playing kind of that side-ish, and he was getting no help. Stuart Armstrong was pressing further up the pitch. And once they got past him, Walker-Peters was stuffed. And he was, so the fact that Cancelo set up 2 glorious chances for Mahrez in the first minute. He scored the goal himself. He then had a hand in the 3rd and 4th goal in the second half. Both, and each time, no pressure on him. And they were just playing triangles around Walker-Peters. And I felt quite sorry for him. And I would criticise the second half for not addressing that, because it just carried on. It had obviously been the problem at half time. Okay, you're 2-0 down. But maybe we needed to bring Larios on earlier and play him in front of Walker Peters or play him behind him, because City, if you're having success with it, you're obviously going to keep doing it.
On, yeah.
And we just didn't react. So I'd point the finger at Ralph on that one, but we did okay, and I think most of us would have accepted 4-0. Bazunu had a decent game. I thought the two centre halves did relatively well, but it came at a cost in other areas. It's interesting the point Steve made about we picked attacking players in the wide positions, Aribo and Armstrong. We all know Stuart Armstrong struggles a bit sometimes with the fitness levels required to chase around for 90 minutes, and Aribo is not a pressing player either. That's not his game, and he got found out on the third goal. He just let Mahrez go basically, and so there were some positives from it. We kept going. We didn't capitulate, but then against that, you could say City phoned it in for the last half an hour, like they did against Man United the previous week. Game's done, and Pep's far too clever to go chasing 7, 8, 9. If he wasn't going to do it against Man United, he certainly wasn't going to do it against us.
Not against us, no.
They've won the game. Happy days. So it was okay. We can take a bit from it, but there's certainly things that we could have done better.
Alfie, you were at the game yesterday. How big was that gulf between the two sides? What did you make of it? What were your takeaways?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that Man City side we're looking at is probably one of the best teams that we'll see. But I don't want to talk too much about Man City, really. Look, everyone knows how good they are. Everyone expected that result. For me, Southampton, they tried to be brave. I think that's something that was interesting. Like Steve pointed out and Glen pointed out, it started with the 4-2-2. It caused problems last year. They wanted to be brave. The first half was punctuated with moments where Ralph was urging his players to get up the pitch, to play it forward, and they would literally turn around and pass it back to Bazunu again, over and over and again. And he was getting so angry, so frustrated. And I think maybe it's admirable. Maybe it's admirable that he wanted to he got the results last year, was going to do it again. Maybe it was naivety. I think something else that was perhaps a little bit naive is the way that James Ward-Prowse has been used this year. And of course, there's nothing that Ralph can do about the fact that Romeo Lavia is injured. Ori Romeo was sold on deadline day, and they haven't got, at the moment, a competent midfield backup. Ibrahim Diallo's struggling a little bit. Maitland-Niles probably not ready yet. But what it does is it means that Ward-Prowse has absolutely no license to go anywhere. And he's not a player who's a particularly tough tackler. He's not quick across the pitch. What he is good at is getting on the ball and shooting, primarily, delivering the ball around the edge of the area. And, he didn't touch the ball around the edge of the area once. Against Spurs, who are a good side as well, he had that chance, he had the goal, and then, of course, it all fell apart. But, I worry that I worry it's going to put him off a little bit. I think, he is responsible for his performances, but he will feel there are forces at work at the moment where he's not being able to put his best foot forward. And I think that could leave a sour taste if he doesn't go to the World Cup.
There's a few points in there, actually, Alfie. And Steve, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on James Ward-Prowse, because Alfie mentioned it there. We spoke a little bit about it this last weekend, actually, after the game. He seems to be really suffering from a lack of midfield cover. He's missing Romeo, isn't he, at the moment? And for whatever reason, it's just not happening for him. So I wondered what your thoughts are on that right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly missing a player alongside him to do kind of the dirty work, the stuff that isn't as Alfie said, isn't really suited to his game. But at the same time, he's also not doing the stuff that he's good at. And for me, his performances this season haven't been remotely reflective of the highest paid player at the club captain. He's the guy that's ultimately got in that role. You're expected to kind of stick your hand up and be the one that kind of drags the team through it. And I mean, we saw last season that he did it when he had competent players alongside him for the most part, and we kind of did enough last season. But it's not really been. I mean, this season his performances have been way down. Even on the sort of back end of last season, where collectively we were awful, he was the one kind of standout player in that. But yeah, this season's he's barely got started. Even allowing for the goal at Spurs. I mean, I struggle to think of another game where he's actually I've looked back at his performance and thought, yeah, he's actually had a good game there. But it is what it is. I mean, it's one of those things where how much do you judge on his own individual position in a team that is clearly so dysfunctional at the moment.
Obviously, lots of talk this week about Alfie about the manager and his job being at risk. I know he was kind of addressing it again. He was asked about it again afterwards. Did his side play like they were playing for the manager to you? You were saying that they were sort of playing back and he was shouting his instructions. I guess when your back's up against a wall like this, you want your players to go out and give their all for you. Was that the sense that you got yesterday?
I'd be lying if I said that was the sense I got, because I don't think they were, of course. But I think that might not necessarily be the manager. I think when you go to Man City, I'd be scared. I'm not a professional footballer, obviously, but I would know that they're all better than me. All 11 players they've got are better than me. They're going to be quicker than me, stronger than me, and you can quite easily cave. You can't say they're playing for the manager, but I don't think that. Well, I don't know exactly. What I can say is when Ralph came in into the press conference after, he was surprisingly smiley. He was pretty chirpy. I think he knew the questions he was going to be asked, and he was already sick of them. And he had a couple of jabs at questions that he felt were silly. He made a couple of jokes. He joked about the fact they lost 9-0, went to Man City. He joked about the fact that he's never been asked these questions before. And he didn't look to me like somebody who was going to walk out that room and expect a phone call, or expect to be told that his players don't like him or they don't want to play for him or anything. But when you look at you can see you've got eyes, and there's no guarantee there that there's any real back in there. There's no character in the performance, but I think it's just such an impossible task to play at City that you can't really pick those kind of conclusions.
So do we take that game in isolation, Glenn? Is that the thing here? Do we take that game in isolation, or does it add to the case for getting rid of the manager quicker? We spoke in recent weeks about I think it was 12 points, wasn't it, from 21 games?
3 wins in 21 games.
1 clean sheet in the last 21 as well. We're 17th. Yeah. We played 9 games now. So do we just forget about the Man City result, or is it all part of the bigger picture and it just needs to be done sooner rather than later?
Well, yeah, I mean, Manchester City are a fantastic team, as we all know. So, yeah, you can write it off. But if you want to be critical, I've already mentioned the lack of change at half time, which was desperately needed. That's happened many times before, where something so blatantly obvious is a problem and we've not done anything about it. And big surprise, it's carried on happening. It was another game where we had no idea how to attack whatsoever. It seemed we've got absolutely obsessed with our work against the ball, and with the ball there's another important component which doesn't seem to get talked about, is work off the ball. Now work off the ball is running into space, wanting the ball, taking a bit of a risk to run forward and be available to pass to, and we just don't do that. Everything is so straight lines with Saints. Imagine, and we talk about Ward-Prowse, imagine being a midfield player playing for Saints and you're trying to go forward. Basically, you haven't got anyone to pass to. No one's moving. It's called pass and move for a reason. You can't have one without the other. So Ward-Prowse, Diallo, whoever's playing the centre of midfield, most of the time, if they look forward, they got no one. They're then with back to the goalkeeper, back to the centre halves, out to the wing, out to the fullback. So it is very difficult, but I do wonder what they're working on from an attacking point of view, because didn't attack against Man City, fine. We didn't attack against Villa. We didn't really attack against Wolves. There's a problem there. 3 wins out of 21, and I don't know how many goals we've scored in those 21 games, but it's probably averaging less than a goal a game. I imagine. That's a problem there. But it's not Ralph's fault that we've got the strikers that we've got. I will say that there's been a few comparisons with the Claude Puel season. We went into that season with Charlie Austin, an injured Jay Rodriguez, and Shane Long, and then wondered why we didn't score many goals. We've gone into this one with Che Adams, who's good at holding the ball up. Adam Armstrong, who's quick, but he ain't nothing else. And Sekumara, who's a kid. And then we're wondering why we're not scoring goals, or we're not building up play properly. That's I don't blame Ralph for that, and I don't really blame him for the problems we've got in midfield. But on the other side, can you afford to play a 2-man midfield when you haven't got anyone to partner Ward-Prowse? You know, that's why he's paid the big money to come up with solutions to this and get the most out of his squad. Said all along, you can only judge a manager by how well he does with the resources he's got available. And I would say that setting up with two players in the centre of midfield when one of them clearly isn't up to it is, you know, you're asking for trouble. So I don't think he's been covering himself with glory for quite a while now. Seems to have lost his bravery. Okay, we went for it a little bit today. Sorry, against City, but for me there wasn't really enough. There was no goal threat there, which you have to have some sort of threat against City. Otherwise, they will just, you know, they'll camp their defenders on the halfway line, pass you to death, and you know, and that's what happens. But you know, against West Ham next week, it's a game where we really have to win that. West Ham and Bournemouth are huge, and the club have got to make a decision whether they're more likely to win those games with Ralph in charge or without him. And I think it's reaching the point now.
We'll get on to West Ham in just a moment. I just want to finish on Man City, Steve. I think Ralph said yesterday, we didn't sit deep, we tried to be brave. Were we brave enough? I saw a stat flying around about the XG yesterday. I think it was the lowest since records began back in 2014, which, you know, to me is not being overly brave. I don't know what you made of it.
I mean, bravery is defined in many ways, isn't it? And it's, I mean, just taking pot shots where you've got no chance of scoring. I don't really see that as brave. So I don't really kind of align the XG score with how brave we were. But I mean, I think the way that Ralph defines it is being brave in terms of wanting to press the ball even when you're getting forced back. And I mean, first half, yeah, sure, we were okay in that respect. I think second half we sat off a little bit too much, I think. So I mean, maybe he's half right. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I find sort of these sort of terms like being brave in a game, it's, you define it how you kind of fancy defining it based on whatever argument you're trying to suit. And it'll almost certainly not correspond with how the foreign manager, whose first language isn't English, has defined it. I don't think there's a correlation between that and the sort of shot shy nature of the team at the moment.
One of the other things we mentioned last week, Alfie, was the goalkeeper and whether Bazunu would, had that been last season, had that been McCarthy or Forster, probably been swapped out by now for not keeping a clean sheet. Bizarre as it is, he seemed to do all right yesterday and shower himself in a bit of glory, because I thought there were some good saves there yesterday. I
thought he did really well, to be fair. Yeah, like you say, they conceded 4 goals, but could he have done anything about any of them? Maybe one at most. He kept Erling Haaland out, a couple one-on-one shots really well. And I thought his kicking was slightly better, to be fair, yesterday. I think that's somewhere people have pinpointed that he needs to improve. Clearly, he's used to playing against League One opposition. There's not the space that he thought there was. And I actually tweeted that I think it was a good performance and that he needed it. And someone responded to me saying, you know, he didn't need it, but I think he did. Like you say, the fact that people were even talking about it, you know, he did need it. He's only 20 years old. He's gone back to the Etihad Stadium, played there for the first time. I think he'll be really pleased with that, and it can only be a good thing because, you know, if there's somebody you do want to do well and do want to stay in the team, it is the goalkeeper. He's going to be there hopefully for the next 3 or 4 years at least. Yeah, I was impressed, to be fair.
SaintsFC Will's watching on Twitch is the little purple logo. He says, great pod as always. All the negativity there seems to be around Ralph at the moment. I was just wondering where you guys feel we should be aiming for this season with the current team. I guess we'll get onto that when we do West Ham in just a moment, and who may or may not be in charge, and where we're going to finish. Ellie says, I think Ellie said, if we started against Everton like we did against Manchester City, then it would have been a different story because we played well, but City were just a bit too strong.